I'm not quite going live yet. There we go. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the True Life Podcast. Hope everybody's day is going beautiful. I hope the sun is shining. I hope the birds are singing. I hope the wind is at your back. I'm going to get into the roots of resilience. I have with me today an incredible show who's had an extraordinary journey. Today, we're honored to be joined by the one and only Diane Danvers Simmons, a true Renaissance woman and a powerhouse in every sense of the word. Diane's story is woven from a tapestry of remarkable experiences. Each one is vibrant as the next. From her days as an international advertising executive at just 27, shaking up the corporate world with her bold creativity, to her role as a fiercely devoted mother and co-parent to a beautifully blended family of 4. Diane has mastered the art of thriving in every role she undertakes. But Diane is so much more than her titles. She's a world traveler, a Reiki master, and the visionary founder behind Own It, Feel It, Live It, a dynamic platform for women's empowerment. With her British wit, American spirit, and boundless courage, she's a storyteller who doesn't just tell it like it is, she elevates it, making every conversation a celebration of authenticity and strength. Her memoirs, articles, and keynote speeches resonate with humor, candor, and wisdom, shining a light on what it means to live fully, boldly, and unapologetically. So pour a cup of tea or something a little stronger if you're part of my audience, and join us as we dive into the incredible life of Diane Danvers Simmons, where corporate gift meets soul deep passion. And every chapter is a testament to the power of reinvention. Cheers to the unstoppable. Diane, thank you so much for being here today. How are you?
I'm good, and I'm just kind of breathing deeply after that really incredible introduction. Thank you. I want to get to know me now.
Right?
Yeah. And actually, I just want to throw in one other thing there. In writing the book, I really moved into taking the concept of Own It, Feel It, Live It, and creating a podcast and some in-person workshops with my daughter. And that's called Mothers and Daughters Unfiltered. So I want to give my daughter a shout out there. Because as we'll get into, when you go to the depths of your soul and start writing a story and looking at your own life and trigger points, that's when some of these ideas percolate. So I'm really looking forward to it, George, and thank you for inviting me onto your show.
I'm excited you're here. I'm very fortunate to get to speak to lots of people who have overcome tremendous things that have happened in their life. And I can't shake the idea that so much of it is necessary. These incredible traumas that happen to us while happening, it's a nightmare, and it's, how am I going to get through this? Or maybe you lose someone along the way, or maybe you don't ever come out the same. But maybe just a quick way to jump into this before we jump into the story. Is it necessary? Is it necessary to be broken in order to have the light shine through?
I think it's part of the human experience, and whether we want to admit it, accept it, it's very cliche, but it really does make us stronger. And unless we go through that human experience, we can't be human, and we can't have empathy for anybody and any situation. And that's really one of the reasons I wrote the book, because I would kind of tell my story, and I won't give away anything right now, but I would share a little bit of it, and people would go, but how come you've ended up normal, or you've got a positive outlook, or you seem to be happy? And I'm like, yeah, because you have to go through some form of hell to get to the other side. And I think I look at it as all these experiences make up the individual and give me the strength to be the person I am today, and to have overcome the challenges I did. I wouldn't have if I hadn't have gone through what I did.
Yeah, it's well said. Thanks for sharing that. The book is titled My Mother Next Door, and it seems sort of ominous when you just read the title, you know. Like I always think of Mommy Dearest when I start hearing like his relationships. And I'm like, oh no, what happened? But you know, without giving away too much of the secret sauce, or you know, can we dance around sort of the story a little bit? Maybe you could fill us in with a little bit of a backstory and sort of set a hook for everybody.
Okay. So there is a reason it's simply called My Mother Next Door, because she really was. Exactly 1 week after my 16th birthday, you know, I come home from school, long walk with my friends, doing the normal Monty Python silly walk, because that's the era I grew up in, you know, pop in one of my sweets, pretending it was whatever, the happiness pill or whatever it was at the time, but basically our Monty Python hats on. Get home, jump on the counter for my normal cup of tea and banter at the end of the week. And I'm going to say this, my Irish Catholic mother, who considered herself a heathen in the eyes of the Catholic Church, which is another funny story because mother was incredibly funny and a realist. And she looked at me and, you know, having our cup of tea, and she said to me, I'm leaving you and your father tomorrow. And I'm like, what? What, you know, come on, Mum, you're always threatening to leave. I know you're not going to leave. And she goes, I am. I said, well, when are you going to leave? And she goes, tomorrow. And I'm like, you know, where are you going to go? Next door. And I'm sitting there, and of course, you know, typical teenager, disgust, don't believe it. Off I go, meet my friends that night, think it's, you know, it's another one of Mum's threats. But there's something in my gut that's churning where I have this sense that this is different. Anyway, as we did back then, this is all set in this kind of late 70s. I go to my Saturday morning job, come home, no radio, deathly silence, dark house, no one's there. I run in, look around downstairs, run upstairs, open the wardrobe, all of her clothes, her face creams, everything of hers is gone. No note, no number, nothing. So what do? I go from the blue door, number 49, to the green door, number 47, knock on the door, and she opens, and I look at her and like, have you really done this? And she said, yeah, I'm done. You know, obviously she invited me in. And we sat down again over another cup of tea, as the British do. And she says, I'm done. I've given you and your father 16 years of my life. I'm done. You're big and ugly enough to take care of yourself, the dog, and your father. And I want to get on with my life now. My mother was 60. She had me very late in life. And that is part of the background story, which is really integral to the overall story, because it begins to explain why people do the things they do. So she's 60. So I say to her, well, you know, you're sharing the house with 3 college guys. You know, you're going to live with these guys? And she's like, yes, absolutely. And so she'd moved next door with 3 hot college guys. And when I asked her the question, what does Dad have to say about this? She said, nothing. I'm like, why? You know, I'm sure he's a man of little words, but I'm sure he said something. And she said, I haven't told him. So I said, well, who's going to tell him then? And she said, you are. So that's kind of where the crux of the story begins. But within that, I give the context of my mother had divorced her first husband, already had 2 teenage children, 18-year-old and a 15-year-old. My father's a widower with a 14-year-old, sorry. And they're dating. They get pregnant with me. What do you do in 1960? You get married. But she was ready to start another life. And the story kind of goes from there, and we'll get in. I know you have questions for me. I don't want to spill everything to begin with.
Man, it brings up so many thoughts about responsibilities, expectations, tacit agreements, and mother-daughter relationships, abandonment, all these things. And for a teenager, all that stuff had to be going through your mind. Like, what the heck is going on here? Like, what do you mean you're leaving? Aren't you supposed to be my mom? Aren't you supposed to help me and be here for me? And what do you mean I got to tell my dad? Well, you're married to him. Why don't you tell him? Like, how did you deal with that? Like, right after you have that conversation inside the room, is your head just spinning, or are you just like, okay, I'm a teenager, I'll just go do this stuff?
It's really interesting. When you write a book, you really have to go to that quiet place.
Yeah.
You have to, after you've gone and spoken to everyone, research, try to understand, spoken to siblings, spoken to family members, spoken to friends. I reached out to my high school friends and said, what was your perception of the time? But after you go through all of that, you have to have this quiet. And honestly, I still remember sitting in that front living room of hers as if I was observing from the rafters. It was like I was out of my own body, watching what was going on, as if I was in some sort of Shakespearean play, trying to work this out. But what I didn't understand or know at the time, my mother was clearly a narcissist. And so the way it's presented to you by someone with that personality is that, oh, yeah, I see why she's doing this. This is perfectly acceptable. This is normal. Yes, of course she needs her freedom. But you think about it, I'm also thinking, hang on, I'm the one that's meant to be running away from home, not you. I'm the 16-year-old here, not you. You're the 61-year-old. You got your numbers mixed up. So it was very strange, but I had always been, and I always believe we choose to be born into the families we're born into. And I chose to be born to my mother. And I say this in the book very openly. I chose to be born to my mother to toughen me up for this world and to be enlightened in ways that people would find totally contradictory. Because she was like this, Horish, the fairies, gypsies, horoscope, you name it. She took me to that realm, but then was very grounded and practical. So really interesting mix. But I went back and I literally remember sitting at my stairs, and it's interesting. It's actually, you relive that your body holds a lot of this. You relive it, and I can feel the emotion right now. My father was like my foundation, the solidness in my life. And this figure, this person that was like the strength, the backbone, the person I could always trust. And so it was really one of those pivotal, life-changing moments for me where my father walks in the house. And I remember meeting him in the hallway and him saying to me, where's your mum, Diane? Where's your mother? Because the radio wasn't blasting. There were no smells coming out of the kitchen with the, wonderful meals she would make. And I had to stand there and tell him, she's left us, Dad. And of course he's confused. He's like, what do you mean she's next door taking, checking on her students and stuff like that? And I'm like, no, she's left us, Dad. And I remember him kind of slumping into my arms, and we just hugged each other, and I said, we're going to be okay. We have each other. We're going to be fine. And I'm the child comforting the adult. And at that point, my role changed in the family. I'd always been the only one that spoke to everyone because there was always this mayhem going on around me. But it was where I knew I kind of had to take on this role of the keeper of the peace. I had to be the go-between, and I had to try and work out how to be the vessel, I suppose, for both their emotions. So it was really heavy. It was really hard. But then again, when I think back, I have to thank her and thank him for giving me the strength to be able to stand there and do that. Because I couldn't have done that if I didn't have that loving foundation where I'd been kind of given the freedom to really work things out for myself in life. Whether I fell down, the freedom to play in the woods, whatever that was. But that was a life, one of those moments I'll never, ever forget. It will always be in me. And it was the moment I vowed never to do unto my own children what my mother did to me. Because basically she left me to tidy up her mess.
Is it generational? Did your mom have a horrible relationship with her mom?
I would never use the word horrible relationship.
It sounds like a horrible relationship.
It really wasn't.
Your parents abandon you. That's horrible. Like, clean up all my mess now. I'm 60. I'm gonna go live with these kids. I've done enough. Like, that's such a horrible. That's a horrible parent that does that. That's a horrible parent. Maybe she taught you some skills, but that's horrible.
It's a thoughtless parent.
I'll go with that.
It's a selfish, thoughtless parent. But it's interesting that, and this is again a little bit of a story.
Yeah, let's hear it.
So I had a very good relationship with my mother up until that point. Very honest, great relationship. But I could see, and this is where we forget, children are so observant and so much smarter than any of us give them credit for. I could see the what would I call it? The key triggers that led to her leaving. And I talk about those in the book. But the last one had been, I won't go into the others. The last one had been when she wanted to go back to work. She'd raised 2 children on her own. She'd lost 2 children in the Second World War because of, the war, basically, them being killed in the war. And then she made the choice to raise a child much later in life. That being me, when a lot of people wouldn't. And she, I'm kind of getting a little stuck here, but I think, as I said, she was a great mother raising me. She made bad choices and she handled things badly. So I knew when she wanted to go back to work and my dad said, no wife of mine works. I can provide for my family. That was the beginning of the end for them. And then you have this blended family around you where this sibling doesn't get on with her. The other sibling has friction with my father. And there's another sibling who my mother doesn't speak to, but my father is on her side. So there's all this stuff going on around. There's all these complexities. So I would call her an incredibly complex woman. And this is why, when you say she's a horrible mother, I had to write the book, because people will look at it and go, oh my God, what a bitch. Excuse my French, Italian, whatever you want to call it. But I was like, you know what? It's more complex. Life is so much more complex than that. And so did I have issue with her then? Yes, of course I did. But she moved next door. So she was still right there to help with things. And I saw her every day. But she really did give me the tools to be able to deal with any situation. Back to your first question. She gave me those tools. So back to the story of where I got to this, but the generational question. Mm-hmm. And I'm not making excuses for her because she did some horrible things, but people love in different ways and they show their love in different ways. So when my daughter was about 18, first year in college, and my husband and I were going through our own issues, but when we were going through our issues, I actually sat down with my children and said, your father and I are clearly at this point where we're not getting on. There's a lot of things we need to sort out. And Dad's going to move out for a little while. But understand, the family stays intact. It's the structure that has changed. We will still have Sunday dinner together. We will still have holidays together. But we have to work this out. And we're not doing a very good job of working it out in the house together. So we're going to give each other space. And my husband and I are together now. So it was handled very differently. But still, daughter going off to college, she had a lot of turmoil, a lot of issue with this. And we've always been very, very close. We go on trips every year together. We spend time together. We talk about everything together. So I realized our relationship was at that, again, pivotal point. And so I decided to go to Morocco, of all places, on this trip to explore. And everyone's like, why are you going to Morocco? Didn't they just bomb, Marrakesh last year? And I'm like, yeah, but they could bomb anywhere. So, you got to keep living. But I wanted to take us out of our date. And I'm blessed that I can do that. But I'm a traveler. That's how I live my life. But I wanted to be in a totally different situation where we were hiking every day. We were doing yoga. We were meeting these different people. And the first night at the retreat we were at, I'm sitting around the table and there's about 10, 11 of us. Escape to Shape, it was called. And I'm looking and I'm thinking, oh my God, what have I got us into now? And the night before, I had been really sick, really, really sick. And I'm up a couple of days later, because I was that ill. And I'm sitting by the pool resting. And I turned to this German lady who's on the trip. And I said, I'm sorry if I made such an awful sound. But, I obviously had food poisoning or something. And I apologized that I kept everyone up all night. And she goes, oh, well, we thought it was a horror movie, quite honestly. But she said, look at you. You've purged yourself for a new beginning. And I'm thinking, who is this woman? I don't even really know her. But at dinner that night, after dinner, people go to bed and there's 4 of us left. And she and her husband, who's a Turkish man, very unusual couple, turns out they're channelers. And she literally looks at me after dinner and says to me, you need to forgive your mother. I'm like, what? What? How do you know about my mother? I have forgiven my mother. She goes, no, you haven't. She said, you're still carrying it. You need to forgive your mother. And if you don't, your daughter will carry the burden and it will be carried for generations. And I thought about it and I was like, God, yeah, she is carrying this weight. She's carrying this responsibility for me. And we even she led it, a meditation with my daughter and I together, where we both went back to being babies in our mother's arms. And I looked at her at the end of it and she was back to the child that she still needed to be as a 17-year-old. And we talked about how she felt she needed to protect me or take care of me. She was taking on the role that I had taken on. So I realized I needed to change that generational pattern. In answer to your question, my mother's relationship with her mother, my mother grew up in a family of basically all boys, poor in Ireland, and her mother worked, so her grandmother brought her up. And my mother left at 16 because she had no opportunity in Ireland. And she was made to leave school at 14 to take care of her brothers while her mother went out to work. And then it was under her mother's care in the Second World War that her first child died. So there were, even though my mother took care of her mother later in life, and she really admired and loved her mother, there were these patterns that had been formed that I needed to change. And I think I have. That was the purpose of writing the book.
Thank you for sharing it. It's interesting to get to hear how patterns can be changed forever. It sounds to me becoming aware that there is a pattern might be the first stage, and then finding the courage to forgive. I know that sounds like a weird thing to say, find the courage to forgive, but it's hard to forgive, like especially when you've been wounded at a young age, and that wound just festers and gets more and more the more you hold on to it, like the more salt you pour into it and the bigger it gets and you make it, like it almost becomes an engine for moving forward. Like you channel that hate, you channel that anger, and that's what moves you forward on so many levels. How did you, like, what was it? Like you needed to forgive your mom, but did you think to yourself, if I don't do this, my daughter has to do it and then I become a horrible person? Or like, what was the catalyst that made you do it?
The catalyst really started with her doing what she did, the way she did it, and making that vow at 16. I mean, I really did make that vow. And I also, I think part of that is looking at my life as more than me. It's not, as a mother, it is not just about me. I do impact my kids. I do impact my stepkids. I do impact other people. And that can be good or bad. So my thing has always been, and I've always said this to my kids, you can tell me, say absolutely anything to me. If something happens to you, and something will, I promise you it will, you can come and tell me. You can call me any time of night and I will be there. But if you don't tell me, then I can't be there and I can't help you and I will be cross. Excuse me. So I think it's the first act of being willing to listen and look at your children. And I've written about this in a few articles, looking at your children as these people that you've brought into the world to hopefully do some good in the world, but to also just have a good relationship with. I didn't bring them into the world to serve me and to be molded into what I want. They have to be their own person. And this is where the quandary of my mother comes in, because my mother wanted me to be my own person. Maybe it's because she was a Gemini, who knows? She wanted me to be my own person. But on the other hand, she wanted to control that. But she could never control me. And that became more and more apparent. Now, her mother, her family could never control her, which that's good. I mean, I write about that in the beginning of the book. I thank the Dumphy women for their spirit and their independence, and the fact they were all unorthodox. They went against the norm and they did what they needed to do. You can do that, but you don't have to do that and injure people along the way. So that's the piece I had to change. I can be whatever I want, but I am not going to do it at the sacrifice of my family. And it's a really fine line. And I'll give you an example. My daughter and I had the podcast, Mothers and Daughters Unfiltered. We ran it for 2 years. Really successful, really wonderful. But it got to the point when my daughter and I were knocking heads. She's a strong personality, very smart, beautiful woman. And she came to, and we would have conversations and we'd get onto the podcast and business and blah, blah, blah. And she came to me in the end, she goes, Mum, I love you more than anything and I would do anything for you. But I can't do this podcast anymore. I feel it's interfering with our relationship. And I need you to be my mum. I need you to be my mum. I need you to be my friend. I don't want to be talking about this every time we talk. We have a relationship, a good one, and I don't want it to hurt that. And that's when I had to stand back and my ego had to go, oof, I've invested so much in this. We've been doing so well. But my relationship with my daughter is more important than any podcast. So that's where there are other ways I can reach out. There's other ways maybe I can affect change or help other people. I don't have to do it through the podcast with her. So I can see where that trying to have control over someone's life had to be changed. And it goes beyond me, and it's about them and their desires. I hope that answered the questions.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Did you ever get a chance to like talk to your mom? Like, is your mom still alive?
No, she died. You got to remember, she was 45
Right.
when she
You were
had me.
16, when you were 16. Did you ever get a chance to go back and talk to her about like all the things that had happened, or confront her, or forgive her face to face?
It's interesting. We would talk about bits and pieces of it as we went. I mean, she did end up coming back into her life, stayed in her own house, but she used to come, and probably about a year and a half after she left, clean, tidy. We even tried a holiday. We went on holiday together as a family, which I write about in the book, which it was to Israel. It was hysterical. Anyway, you have to read about that trip. We did on and off, and I had a period when I was in my late 20s, early 30s, where particularly late 20s, I couldn't actually go and see her without having a friend with me, because she would irritate me so much. That anger was there that I didn't know how to release. But when I was in America and I met with a medium, and I was probably about 31, I remember it vividly. And it was in California. And he said to me, you have to learn to trust in this life. And you have to forgive your mother. And again, this was you have to forgive your mother. And he said, you don't have to do it face to face. Because I was very frustrated with her at the time. And I was living in America. Hey, why do you think I moved to America? One of the reasons to get away.
Right. Get the hell out of there.
I didn't want to get caught in that web that was going on. And he said, but just do it in your heart. Do it from afar, sit and meditate on it. So I did. And that really, really helped. But when we never really talked in depth about her leaving Dad. When she would start ranting about him, I would say, do not say anything detrimental about my father, whether, whatever your opinion is, you have that, but I don't. And I won't stay here and listen to you speak badly about him. But when she was dying, and I write about that in the book, the very end of the book is about basically when she was dying, and she was going in and out of, people say dementia, but I think she really was seeing the other side, because she would talk. I'd be sitting on the bed in the hospital and she'd be going and saying, hey, oh my God, my hair isn't done. What have they done with my dentures, Diane? I look a mess. And look, there's Alec over there. Or there's Tom, who was her first husband. Oh, look, I don't want them to see. So she's having this like conversation of being here, not being here. But we talked, and she admitted some things. And she said to me, I always knew you were the strong one and you could handle things. She said, but I've done terrible things to your sister, Mari, my eldest sister, which she had. But then Mari's done awful things back to her. They did have a horrible relationship. But Mum was cruel to her, really cruel. She typical Irish mother. They make no bones about sons being the favorites. But I had enough love to go around. Didn't bother me. We're each had a different relationship, and that's the other thing we have to remember. We all have different relationships with our parents. Each sibling has a different relationship. But she was saying to me, oh, I've done terrible things to your sister. Do you think she'll ever forgive me? And I said, Mum, yes, she has. She's here. She's the reason I'm here. She called me and I got on a plane to get here because of her. So she had those regrets, and she said, what will happen to your brother? I'm so worried. I said, don't worry. He has a wife. He has children. He'll be fine. We'll take it. You can go, Mum. You can let go. And so it was like she needed permission to let go, and that things were okay. But as I wrote this story, and I walked away from this book probably about 3 times. And, I live in Lake Tahoe in Klein Village, not on the lake, but looking at the lake. And I go down to the lake, and Saturday mornings I have coffee with this really interesting group of women who are all Reiki masters. And, I have this really rich life, I'd say, of business, spiritual side, because we're living the human condition, we need to be able to experience all of it. And this one woman, Debbie, who reads cards, wonderful woman, she said to me as I was writing the book, she said, and she didn't know anything about the book then. She didn't really know me very well. She said, there's this woman in this tree behind you. And she goes, oh my God, she's hysterical. And she started describing my mother. Wait, I know it sounds weird to people. And she said, but she says she's sorry. And she said, you need to write this story, and she's okay with you writing this story. Which kind of gave me permission. And then I went full steam ahead, because this was a story I did not want to write, but I was clearly destined to. And every time I would tell a snippet, people would go, oh my God, they burst out laughing. And then they'd be embarrassed about laughing. And I'd be going, no, it's okay. I laugh at it. I've actually written this book with a reverent humor as well as pathos, because humor allows us to approach subjects and to take off the hard edges of subjects. And I used humor with my mother to survive her. So I would diffuse a situation as a kid with humor. And she would appreciate that, and she would laugh. But, she was a strong Irish woman who went through a lot. And I think, the other thing you have to think about, and this was, you talk about generational. She left Ireland to move to England for success and for a better life. I left England to move to America for career success and what I thought would be a better life. And so I married an American. She married someone in Britain. I had my children in the country, in a new country. She had her children in a new country. So you begin to see those similarities, and you then have to look at, what is it I need to fix in this?
To me, it sounds like and I think about this with my own family and other people that I speak to, but it seems like an evolution of awareness. Like, you had to go through those things. And like you said, you were given some exotic tools to fix complex problems, but being handed that tool at such a young age is difficult to handle. You don't know how to handle a tool like that until you wield it around a little bit. And as you get older, you're like, wow, this tool is pretty handy. I can really hurt people with it, or I could use it to fix stuff, but what's your take on evolution of awareness? Like, it sounds like you shouldered a lot of the same sort of proclivities as your mother, but you wielded this tool in a different way. You were able to be more aware because of what happened to you. Is it an evolution of awareness?
I think it's a couple of things. It is an evolution of awareness, which, and I'm making a note so I don't forget that, that you learn over life, over experience, over life. And it's accepting and admitting things. But what I had is, as a young child, I knew I was loved. I knew where my mother, her father was very hard on her, treated her like a second-class citizen, which is why I think she was this fighting constantly for her identity and to be seen and heard. And she had a very loud voice. She needed to be seen. I mean, the nuns, she was sent down to the dungeons, literally, to wash boiling sheets. And she would tell me those stories because she was outspoken and had opinions. But she was shut down. I wasn't. So that's the first. And I say this particularly to men with daughters. A father figure is important. My father he was 60 when he had me. And I remember as a little girl, him telling me, you are the greatest gift I could have possibly had late in life, because now I get to see the world through a child's eyes again. It's made me young again. And so he was strict and disciplined, but I knew, and I had boundaries. I mean, that's another thing, is boundaries. I had to learn how to use boundaries with my mother. And I did a in-person workshop actually earlier this year in Rancho La Puerta, which is an amazing place down in Mexico, with my daughter. We did it together. And we talk a lot about boundaries, because I have had to learn my boundaries with my own kids and learn how to respect those, where my mother didn't respect boundaries, didn't respect them. So I think in witnessing what I went through, that gave me a great perspective, whether I could deal with it or not at the time. I was very lucky that I had good friends, good, solid friends. And my story wasn't publicized or scrutinized. It was private. I mean, we didn't have counselors at school or anything like that. So I remember one of my friends saying to me recently when I was writing the book, she said, oh yeah, I knew your mum had left and moved next door. And I thought it was awfully strange, but we just kept calm and carried on, didn't we? And it was like, yeah, we did. We just kept going. That was, I grew up in a different culture where we really did just keep going. And you joked about things. I joked about it. But I had my best friend, she's called Sophie in the book, but her name's Hazel. We're still friends. Funny enough, she moved to America as well. And I see her, and we talk all the time. She's like a sister to me. Her family was my saving grace. I was always there. I also had my brother's wife, who was amazing. My sister by my father, who was really grounding, and I could talk to her about it. But I think also because my mother was so vocal and open that nothing was a shock. I kind of knew what was going on. She told me too much, actually. But I think the great awareness came really kind of mid 40s, where I'd carried it, and she did something which just, I was visiting her with my kids. They were babies. And she said something, again, I'm not going to say what it is because it's in the book. And it just put me over the edge. I came undone. And my husband said, you need to go and speak to a therapist, a specialist. So I was probably about 40. So I did. And I had 3 sessions, and they were life-changing. And therapist basically said to me, you don't have to protect your mother anymore. You can accept what she did to you was wrong, and no one should expect a 16-year-old to carry that weight. And you can let go of that now and stop protecting her and telling everyone it was okay. It was not okay. And that was really freeing. I got a sense of why this, therapists work. But, I literally went for those few sessions and talked to friends, really close friends, and talked to my sisters at the time about what my mother had done. And so I was able to really digest it again in a new way and let go of a lot of it. And then I probably in my late 40s, I studied with Deepak Chopra and did some deep dives into really understanding what I was still carrying. And writing the book was clearly cathartic. It really is. And I find it interesting, George, the more I talk about it, the more I learn. So awareness is the apps, and that's why I created Own It, Feel It, Live It. Own It is awareness. It's acceptance. It's awareness of what you've been through or what you're doing. Feel it is allowing yourself, which is what I hadn't done early on, allowing yourself to feel that in your body and to release it in whatever way you need to. And live it is, clearly owning, feeling it, and then being able to move forward. And I do write in the book, the epilogue actually is the purpose of forgiveness is to reestablish our humanity. And that's what it comes down to, awareness and forgiveness. And that's a Westmore quote. And you're right. I think forgiveness and awareness is, as you've said, the courage to accept that there really are things, there are people that are out of our control. I mean, they're simply out of our control. And it's normally not about us, it's about them. And that's why I put the backstory of my mother's life in, so you can get a sense of why she did the things she did. She left home at 16. So to her, that was perfectly fine. But I'm a kid in school doing my O-levels who has no idea how to clean a house or do any of that. nonsense. And,
Right.
she leaves me flat on my face. So it was horrible the way she did it. I mean, it really was horrible what she did. But I think she personally, whether she ever admitted it, she felt that loss. And she knew her mistakes. But I think that, the forgiveness, the other part of forgiveness is it allows us to move forward. And that's all we can do is keep moving forward and trying to do it each step with a little more awareness of how we live this life.
It's a lot to think about. Experience has taught me that anger is a really big blockage for forgiveness. Like you just mentioned, like your husband's like, you got to go see a counselor. Like that means that he was like, listen, Diane, this is you're carrying way too much burden here. This is affecting our family. You got to go talk to somebody. Like maybe, and I don't want to pull too hard on the heartstrings, but like so much of what you're saying appeals not only to my life, but so many people I know who have grown up in a family that was a broken home or had an atrocity happen to it, whether it was, abuse of some kind. But the anger, like, and it sounds like well into your 40s, you had some anger. What was there a point at which the anger became detrimental to you or your family, or what was it that changed your relationship to anger to allow in forgiveness?
I never knew I had any anger. I suppressed it. I suppressed it. So the anger showed up, as I said, in my late 20s to probably mid 20s to 30. And that anger was demonstrated by not being able to go see her on my own, always taking a friend. Partying really hard, work hard, party hard.
Right.
And then I didn't have any anger. It was more, there was a sadness there. I actually there was never anger. I would never call it anger. It was kind of like a disappointment and a sadness. But it was also suppressed I'm throwing that out, I'm blocking that. Right. And it wasn't until she did this thing when I was 40 and I literally walked out of her house. I'm not the type of person that blows up or gets angry. I'm Libra. We just, but when I do, I get really angry. But this wasn't that I was angry when my husband said, you need to go see someone. I was just like, I felt my world was falling apart. I felt like I was falling apart and I needed to speak to someone about it and understand why. Anger, when I was writing the book, I'd be writing, and 1 minute I would be laughing hysterically because I played old Monty Python stuff. I played songs from the era. I played, Dave Allen, all these different things that kind of made me laugh. And then I would literally be in the room screaming at her, yelling, why did you think that was okay? That's where that was released. I never ever released it on anyone. And I can honestly say I was never angry or knew if I was angry, let's put it that way, showed that. I was more sad or irritated at times by her. I never allowed it to trickle into my life. And anger probably that I got on with my life. And probably is one of the things that drove me in my career. I was very, very driven. I came here to America so I could get out of that. And I mentioned that earlier, out of that web of what I felt was so unproductive and unnecessary. And so I was able to move away from it. But it wasn't anger. It was more, I block you.
Yeah.
I'm living my own life. You know, when she came over to help with my first child, and she'd suggest things, I say, Mother, don't tell me how to raise my kids. I know how to do that.
Yeah.
So it was more that of I put this wall up, a
Right.
block, because I have to protect myself. And that's what I did. So I was never angry. Actually, I can honestly say I was never angry until I was writing the book, and then it kind of bubbled to the surface. But I look at pictures of when I was 16, 17, 18, and you see the sadness in my eyes. I never knew that. I see the sadness. There's a real, and I think and I look tired. I look really tired.
Sure.
You know, but then I just got on with my own life. And I write about this in the book. I'm not going to go into it much, but let's put it this way. My father died when I was a few years later after she left, which was so hard. And I stayed in the house on my own. But my father ghosted. He got me out of that house. I couldn't stay there after a while. Yeah. I mean, oh God, I think you'll read the book. You'll see all the things she did. But it's really showing. We expect a lot of women. We expect a lot of mothers. We expect them to be this perfect being. But no one can understand the situation and understand the story until we put ourselves in that person's shoes and understand where they came from. And that's a lot of what we did at the workshop at Rancho La Puerta this year. Understanding what she went through, gives us greater compassion and empathy for their story and their situation.
It sounds like an amazing workshop. And as we've progressed in the conversation, you had mentioned to like not only alternate states of awareness, but channeling or being a Reiki master. Have you, or maybe some of the women in your group, ever used psychedelics to find out ways to move through trauma and PTSD and explore alternatives in that direction?
We haven't, but I have spoken to people who have, actually, I've gone blank on his name, Tony. He's at NYU. He's done a lot of work on psychedelics and end of life.
Yeah.
And that was through the Nantucket Project I met him. And I found it really fascinating how, you know, it has helped people release or go very peacefully. But no, I don't know anyone who has, but as I said, I know this professor who was conducting a lot of safe environments and testing around it.
Yeah. Well, now you know another person. Like it's such a phenomenal way for people to, you know, in the story that I've talked to you so far, it sounds to me that you were able to approach these very delicate situations that were very emotionally charged from a different perspective, almost a third person point of view, where you can approach it without shame, without guilt. That's a huge part of getting past any sort of PTSD, traumas, self-mutilation, whether not physically, but like when you're just in your head and you can't get past this stuff. Like it's so hard to move through these generational patterns unless you can begin to view it without shame and guilt, these giant threshold guardians that are just like, do not pass, you must not go in this cave, you know, like,
right.
But yeah, I bring it up because it's so much of what you said is so psychedelic in so many ways. I had to ask, I'm like, I wonder if she's been on this. But that being said, we got a question coming, and I got a few stacked up over here because the conversation has been so amazing so far. So Forgiveness is a strong theme in your story. Can you share what forgiveness feels like for you in this context? Was there I guess we covered the second part, but can you share what forgiveness means to you now?
Forgiveness for me, besides, as I've mentioned, allowing
Right.
us to move forward without bitterness, it's like this, and again, I write about this in the book. It's like this new dawn for me. It really enables us to feel somewhat whole, grounded, and accepting with some sort of kind of empathy for what's going
Yeah.
on in this crazy, crazy world. And it allows us, and I think this is maybe, and this is just something that's coming to me now, but it allows us to feel like, I know I have a choice.
Yes.
No one's telling me to do this. I'm telling me to do this. I feel, and this is interesting. I haven't written about this anywhere, but I think it is. Ultimately, all this comes down to our choice. Do you want to live your
Mm.
life as a curmudgeon and be bitter and allow this experience to haunt you? Or do you just want to get on with it and live the life you want to live? So whole. Makes me feel whole and in charge.
That's a beautiful answer. It's like it's taking back your authenticity.
Yeah. And authenticity is so important to me. They wanted to make, someone wanted to make a movie out of this at one point, and they sent me the outline, the treatment, and they changed all. I mean, they basically turned it into High School Musical meets The Hangover. And I was like, no, I'm not disrespecting everyone in my family just to make a dime. Forget it. I will be in control of this if anyone makes this. So, yeah, authenticity
That's
is
so
important.
awesome. We have Lucy from Florida, and she says, you grew up navigating a very uncomfortable family dynamic. How did this impact the way you defined family and relationships in your own life?
Well, interestingly, Lucy, I married a man who had 2 children to begin with.
Imagine that.
Imagine. Uh, which is not always easy. It's not easy, particularly when then you have your own 2 children. So for
Yeah.
me, it became about, and this is the big crux of it. When you go into a blended family or you create your own blended family, it's not the children's fault. It's nothing to do with the children. It's the adults who are the problem. So my thing has always been where I saw my mother pit everyone against each other. My belief is you have to try and make everyone feel included and part of something. And it doesn't mean it's going to be easy, but it's kind of like you have to be the big kid in this. And also, you have to have respect for yourself and your own value, and never feel like allow someone to treat you with disrespect and as if you're not part of this new dynamic that you've created. It's like, how do you all fit into this new dynamic? And honestly, just simple communication is important. I mean, in my blended family, we've had some major blowouts. I mean, major. And sometimes we've had to do our space and then come back. But what we've had to do is be willing to sit down in a room and just hash it out. And it's important to tell people in a way that maybe they can understand without hitting them over the head that something hurts. You hurt me, or I don't understand why, or, it's again, it comes down to this thing of we can't live in sound bites. We can't live in without being committed to something and knowing that some things are going to be really, really hard. And it's whether you're willing to stick with it or not. And commitment is something that is part of that. So it's blended families are not easy. They're not easy. But for me, it's also been all the kids just calling each other brothers and sisters, bringing them together on traditional holidays, being there for, each other at key times, and just trying to listen, but not pretending to be perfect, because we're not, and no martyrs. Can't deal with a martyr.
Yeah, that sounds like the keys to living a life worth living is communication. But those tools are hard to come by unless you're given to them as a young individual, right? Like no one, at least I was never sat down and been like, okay, these are the effective keys for communication. Here's how you talk about your feelings, try not to use too much sarcasm, like we have all these defense mechanisms instead of keys to communication on some level. It gets really hard to conversation alone and words fail sometimes.
They do, but my thing is, I've always been that for a traditionalist about sitting down around the dinner table. So, right. And with that's how I was brought up. That's how I brought up my kids. We sit around the dinner table together, or whether it's, dinner at night when they were little, or now when we get together, or Christmas, whatever celebration, but we just have general dinners together or cook together. And it's not so much saying these are the skills you need. It's more having an open conversation, right. And it's the modeling. It's really more about modeling and having and being there and talking, rather than saying, this is what you have to do. Here are the 3 keys to success. Right. It's like when I get asked to written certain articles and we want these 6 points to blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh my God, it's more than 6 points. Is it really? Can I give you 25 and give you 25 essays instead? But again, it's modeling. It's talking. I really feel for parents these days with, everyone on their cell phones or whatever. I never allow cell phones, never have, never will allow cell phones around a dinner table. When we're together, the cell phones are, in your pocket, on your chair, wherever it is, but they're not on the table. So it is, and it's if even to the point if because we're not going to be perfect either. I even remember my son when he was little, yelling at him. I remember it was on the landing of our house when we lived in New Jersey, and I was telling him off about something and raising my voice, and he looked at me. He was 3. He looked at me and he went, rah, 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 rah. And I went, what are you doing? Why are you yelling at me? And he goes, stop yelling at me, Mummy. I'm yelling at you like you're yelling at me because I don't know what you're saying. Talk to me. This was a 3-year-old. And I thought, oh my God, you've taught me a lesson. But it's, again, that's kind of, I learned, okay, I've got to try and if I do yell, if I do get mad, it's saying, hey, maybe I'm sorry I said it that way. What I was really trying to say was, and that's part of the awareness. But I can do that more as an adult. I couldn't have written this book when I was 20. And that's just a realization, a fact of life, that the more experience you have in living in this world, hopefully we get a little better instead of a little worse.
Yeah. On some level, it seems like listening to the stories and talking with you, I can almost envision like a rite of passage when I see the way in which the relationship happened with your mom. And then I go onto your website and I can see the podcast with you and your daughter. And I get to hear some of the stories between the way you share wisdom with your kids. And then just this last comment about, maybe we are spiraling up in like a helical matter as we're moving through this thing on some level. Is that, I guess if you pan back, can you see that picture? Do you think that that's kind of what's happening right here? Is not only an evolution in awareness, but like there is this slow, gradual move upwards of communication and empathy and understanding and becoming something better.
I do. And I think, we're so focused in our society on youth,
Mm-hmm.
and we're forgetting the beauty of aging and the kind of, I always we always talk about, oh, that older person, they have so much wisdom, or why do young kids, grandkids get on so well with their grandparents? And again, that's just something that I think about that. And you ask why I was able to maybe see things, because my father was that. I was really growing up with my grandfather.
Right. Yep.
Who wasn't going through the struggles of being a 40-year-old
middle-aged
parent.
guy. Yeah.
He'd lived life. He was going through the experience of being a 16, my nieces and nephews are my age, so I'm nearer their age than I am any of my siblings. So I think that's a beautiful way of looking at it. And it's, it kind of gives some real hope and kind of intrigue and just, hey, that's a good thing to look forward to. Maybe we get a little wiser. Maybe things get a little better. Maybe we feel we have stuff to share that could be useful. I mean, that's why my daughter and I started Mothers and Daughters Unfiltered, so we could have this intergenerational exchange of ideas and how we look at things versus how they're looking at things. And maybe we can meet in the middle and help each other. God, Natalie, I wish you would do this again with me. But anyway.
Yeah, I love it. I think that there's something to be said about intergenerational living and the wisdom of
Yes. They still do it elsewhere. I mean, that trip I spoke about in Morocco, which was so impactful for my daughter and I, they live intergenerationally.
Yeah. Yeah. I heard a funny quote that said, the reason why grandkids and grandparents get along so well is because they have a common enemy.
I love that. I'm going to keep that. I'm going to make a plaque for that and give it to my kids.
Do it. Totally.
That's the Christmas present.
That is. It's so good. But yeah, it's tough to be. And if you look at the way in the Western world, we've kind of moved into this. We've moved away from that, the intergenerational living. And it's so hard to try and be a mother or a father who is all things, who's a taxi driver, a coach, a mentor, a leader, a homework doer, it's a band coach. It's like, it's so impossible to be all of these things and still feel successful in your own life. Like you are this trailblazer. Like it's such a myth. It's such a myth. And I think it's so damaging to family units when you could maybe when you can have grandparents around that have a whole nother aspect, that have this, encyclopedia of a life lived, that have this wealth of experience and are willing to help out you and your kid. Like, I wish we would turn more towards that. And it could be really well for family units and therapy and like just a break from the whole rat race that we find ourselves in today.
I wholeheartedly agree. It's actually my cousin Mike, who I mentioned at the beginning of the book.
Yeah.
He's doing that with his own. He and his wife are doing that with their own daughter and their own
I
grandkid.
love
And
it.
you know what? Everyone is having is they're all enjoying it. They're all prospering.
Yeah.
You know,
Yep.
it's what families used to do. And you're right. It could be so much less stressful for women in
Yeah.
particular. I mean,
Yeah, of course.
I ultimately gave up my career because I couldn't be going into Manhattan and traveling all over the country, and my husband doing the same, and trying to have a relationship with my kids. You know,
Yep.
it just, I had no family nearby. I had no, you know, so it didn't work, which is why I stepped back. But it was a right decision for us. But if, you know, you had family around, well, my mum actually helped my brother a lot with his kids. So I saw it there. She actually did much better with them. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah. It's I don't know. I'm very thankful and hopeful for the times that we're in, because I not only how heartfelt the book that you wrote is, but I do see this sort of vein of optimism in there when people are going and willing to talk about these difficult things in their life, but not just talk about those, but explain why they were necessary and explain why, hey, because this thing happened, I won't be able to, I will never do this, or because this happened, now I have this tool, or because I have this, I've taken these new lenses and seen the world differently. But I see it as a part of the world moving up in a way that is spiritual and beautiful. And I've I think it's wonderful, Diane. I'm super stoked, and I think I'm hopeful that everybody within the sound of our voice here will go down to the show notes, check out your website, check out the podcast, check out the book, reach out to you. You're an incredible individual who's got book and discovery calls on their website, so they can reach out to you if they have some questions and stuff. But before you've been very gracious with your time, I was hoping that maybe you could tell people where they can find you, what you have coming up, and what you're excited about.
Okay, well, here is the book. So when you look for it, you know what it looks like. You can see the two houses and my mother next door.
Yeah.
You can obviously Amazon, you can order it. It is available in print, digital, and there is an audio book too, which you can get
Nice.
on all the platforms. And you can also go to your bookstores and order My Mother Next Door. It would make a great Christmas gift. And
Yep.
it's really been interesting. When we did our workshop at Rancho La Puerta, which I hope we do another one there and elsewhere, which you can certainly contact me about. It's a 4-part workshop. It's a great book for you and your own mum to have conversations. I saw mothers learning things about their own mothers. I saw the daughters finding out things about their mothers they never knew, and it explained so much to them. So that's the beauty of it. You can find me at mothersanddaughters.unfiltered.com. Honestly, right now I am enjoying being on podcasts about the book. It's like the book actually was launched in 2021 November, and it's having this rebirth, so it must
Nice.
be needed in the world right now. I'm also an artist, which is Diane Danvers Simmons art, which I'm painting, and I'm finding that is an incredible way of expressing and letting go of things as well. But I think you'll find some interesting podcasts on our website, and you'll find more about the book, more about me. Even though you've probably heard enough about me right now, but and there is my contact information as well, of how to reach me. And I'm just very grateful to you, George, for inviting me on the show and for such an intriguing and lovely conversation. I think we could sit here for weeks. And
Yeah.
I there are many articles that I've written for different publications. You'll see a whole section on media and articles, different articles that different magazines have written about the book and the story. But I just hope that you take away from this, and what I try to do in writing this book is, we always need to be willing to look at a story through a fresh lens, be willing to put ourselves into someone else's shoes. And, it's really about letting go of things that are just not serving you anymore, and understanding that we can't solve every problem, that there are other people's problems. All we can do is try and help and be there and make changes with our own families, and think about the impact we have on them and people around us, and how we can keep trying to shine some sort of light in this world. So that's it. It's pink. It's not the mother next door. It's my mother next door. Someone else wrote
My
a book
mother
called
next door.
My Mother Next Door, and you recognize the pink cover. And if you do, please leave rate and reviews are great on Amazon. And I think Barnes and Noble, there's lots of different sites, you'll see.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, hang on briefly afterwards, Diane. I had an absolute blast in this conversation. Thank you for opening up and sharing so much of the story that is
and
close
I am
to,
open for book clubs as well. I do join people on Zoom for book clubs.
Very nice.
But you all have to buy the book.
Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, go down to the show notes. Check it all out. I hope you have a beautiful day. This book makes a fantastic Christmas gift or a Thanksgiving gift if you're so willing. And that's all we have for today, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you have a beautiful day. Aloha.